Before you start the installation of your Sukup Stirring Machine, make sure you have everything you need. A complete list of the parts and tools required for your particular machine can be found in the owner's manual. Lay everything out and get organized. The manual will also spell out the proper installation of the stirring track based on the type of bin you are building, the size and manufacturer of your bin sidewall sheets, and whether the bin sheets have been pre-punched for stirring machine track or if the holes will have to be field drilled. Please take a few minutes to look at the manual. It could save you some time later on. There are a few things that need to be done to the cross tube before placing it on the track. It's easiest if you have a good set of sawhorses to rest the tube on while you work. All stirring machines now come with a stabilizing arm as standard equipment. Slide the locking collars and UHMW bracket plate over the outside end of the cross tube. Clean the shaft on the other end of the cross tube to get it ready for the pillow block bearing. Slide a locking collar onto the shaft, followed by the bearing and then another locking collar. You will need to get the channel hanger and chain ready to support the unit from the peak ring above. Insert the last link of the chain into the slot on top of the channel and slide a bolt through the link and add a nut. Repeat this step on the opposite end of the channel hanger as well. Now slide the satellite carriages onto the cross tube, making sure that the reversing mechanism tab is facing out toward the bin wall. Then add the primary carriage, making sure the toggle gear and the reversing pin are facing the inside center of the bin. Continue to prepare the hanger assembly by locating the hanger pipe and green coupling. Thread the coupling onto the pipe with pipe wrenches, then set it aside. Set the drive wheel onto the track and locate the center hanger. For even-sized bins like 18 feet, 21 feet, etc., use this outer hole. For odd-sized bins like 18 feet 7 inches or 21 feet 8 inches, use this inner hole. Slide the carriages toward the outside of the bin to even out the weight. Attach the center hanger to the pillow block bearing, then climb up to the peak of the bin and install the hanger brackets to the peak ring. Carry the channel hanger with the chains attached up to the peak and thread the chains into the slots in the bottom of the hanger brackets. Count the number of links on each end of the chain to make sure that they are even and the channel hanger is hanging reasonably level. Bring the hanger pipe up and insert it into the hole in the center of the channel hanger, aligning the tab on the coupler with the slot in the hole of the channel hanger. Slip the brass washer over the bushing and feed the bushing up through the hole in the center hanger, and then thread the round electric box onto the lower end of the hanger pipe. Make sure you get this junction box threaded on as tight as you can. It will basically be supporting the entire weight of the stirring machine. Next, level the cross tube by adjusting the chains above while keeping a level on the cross tube below. It is usually best to leave the cross tube just a little high in the middle to allow for some settling over time. Once you have it set, add a bolt and nut to the chain on each side as a safety measure and use wire ties to keep the loose ends of the chain from getting caught up in anything. Now you can bolt the center support for the stabilizing arm onto the center hanger and then turn your attention to the stabilizer kit trolley pivot assembly. There are detailed assembly instructions and drawings in the manual, so check there if you have any trouble. You can set the trolley pivot assembly onto the stirring track, then slide the stabilizer tube through the hole in the center support and add a locking collar to the outside end of the tube. Don't tighten the screw on the locking collar yet. Slip the outside end of the tube over the trolley pivot shaft and insert a bolt and tighten a nut onto the bottom of the bolt. Now you can tighten the locking collar on the other end of the tube. Attach one end of the pivot trolley bracket to the UHMW plate and the other to the trolley itself. Align the entire assembly up and tighten the set screws on the cross tube locking collars to hold the UHMW plate in place. Now you're ready to add the tie bars to the carriages. The number and length of tie bars will depend on your specific stirring configuration. We are working on a 3 auger fastener, so we will have one longer tie bar that connects the primary carriage to the first satellite carriage, and a shorter tie bar that connects the 2 outside satellite carriages together. If your stirring machine has a 5.5-inch cross tube like this one, you will also need to install an additional tie bar between the carriages as shown here. Now you can install the stabilizer arms to each carriage. On the satellite carriages, remember to install the tilt switch bracket at the same time, since one bolt holds both pieces. On the primary carriage, the tilt switch is mounted to the junction box on the motor side of the carriage, and stabilizer arm brackets are added to the motor side of each carriage as well to bolt the stabilizer arms to the bottom of each carriage. To complete each stabilizer arm installation, you will add this U-bolt and UHMW slide plate assembly to the stabilizer tube. Remember to thread nuts onto the U-bolt before adding the slide plate. This creates the proper spacing and allows the slide plate to travel freely along the stabilizer tube as the carriages move back and forth. Once you have everything in position, you can tighten all the bolts. When installing and adjusting the reversing mechanism, it is critical that the timing is set properly. This is done by tripping the reversing mechanism out of its locked position and moving the toggle gears to a centered position. In this centered position, all components should be parallel with the edge of the carriage and each other. When timed properly, the reversing rod toggle gear, that's the gear closest to the bin wall, the drive bearing, and the primary toggle gear should all be parallel to the edge of the carriage. Locate the tab on the top of the carriage closest to the bin wall. Attach the toggle arm using a 5/16" shouldered hex-headed bolt and 1/4" locking nut. Ensure that the pin on the toggle arm is parallel to the edge of the carriage and it should be pointing straight down the length of the cross tube. Feed the end of the reversing rod with the threaded bolt hole through the inside of the satellite carriages and leave it unattended, resting inside the carriage closest to the bin wall. Bolt the opposite end of the reversing rod to the bottom of the toggle gear on the primary carriage using a 5/16" shouldered hex-headed bolt and 1/4" locking nut. Now screw the threaded hanger bolt into the threaded bolt hole at the opposite end of the reversing rod until the hanger bolt hole lines up with the hole in the toggle arm. Bolt the threaded hanger bolt to the toggle arm using a 5/16" shouldered hex-headed bolt and 1/4" locking nut. Check to make sure the reversing mechanism is still centered and the toggle arm is still parallel to the edge of the carriage. Tighten all 3 shoulder bolts using a 5/32" Allen wrench and 7/16" wrench. Make sure the reversing mechanism can move freely by shifting it from one lock position to the other. Now locate the gear motor and remove the bolts and lock washers provided. Save the hardware. Remove the cotter and clevis pins from the 1-inch tube coupler attached to the gear motor shaft. Slide the 1-inch tube coupler onto the cross tube shaft and reinsert the pins to connect the cross tube shaft and gear motor. Adjust the gear motor placement so no binding exists on the pins and center hanger, and so the pillow block does not touch the cross tube. That's why it's best to leave the bolts loose that attach the pillow block bearing to the center hanger so you can make these minor adjustments. Attach the gear motor to the center hanger using the 5/16" by 3/4" bolts and lock washers you removed from the motor earlier, and tighten with a 1/2 inch wrench. When everything is in place, tighten the pillow block bearing to the center hanger. Slide the locking collars against the pillow block bearing and tap each one lightly with a punch to set them in place. Then tighten the set screws on the collars. Run the black 18 gauge 3-wire cord from the primary carriage junction box underneath the cross tube and tie bar and slide it through the eye of the cord hanger. Run the cord along the cord hanger and down the side of the center hanger and secure it with wire ties. Remove the curved cover with the Sukup logo from the front of the gear motor junction box using a 5/16 inch wrench. Save the screws. Insert the 3/8 inch electrical connector from the hardware sack into the hole on the side of the gear motor junction box. Tighten the metal fastening ring inside the box. Thread the 3-wire cord through the electrical connector, providing a drip loop in the cord by the motor. At this point, there will be 4 wires from the gear motor and 3 wires from the 3-wire cord you just inserted into the side of the junction box. Make the connections as outlined in the owner's manual. There is also a wiring diagram located on the back of the cover you removed earlier. Carefully place the capacitor and all wires back into the gear motor junction box and replace the box cover. Make sure you don't pinch any of the wires under the edge of the box as you tighten it down. Remove the shipping lumber from each motor and bolt the motor mount into place. Now slide the springs onto the motor mount rods and then slide the rods through the tubes welded onto the carriages. Secure the motor mounts by installing the pins into the holes on the ends of the motor mount rods. Connect the rotating contact cord plug to plug on the appropriate cord coming from A or S motor on the primary carriage. Remove the cover on the round junction box at the base of the hanger pipe. Feed the wires up through the bottom of the box and thread the rotating contact tightly into place. Run the cords up the center hanger and out to the end of the cord hanger alongside the 3-wire cord from the primary carriage junction box, securing all the cords with wire ties. Be sure to create a drip loop near the rotating contact to keep moisture from being directed back toward the contact. Check the diagrams in your installation manual for the proper connection needed for your particular machine. A quick note about connecting the cords to the motors: our 460-volt motors are factory wired without plugs due to their high voltage, and they will not need to be connected. Also, on 3-phase 3 auger units and on 4 and 5 auger units, you must install a dual lead rotating contact. Also, connect the plugs on short cord A or S motors to the short cords on the primary junction box. On multiple carriage units, connect motors using plugs on appropriate cords. Check the manual for specifics regarding your configuration. On multiple carriage units, connect 2 black wires with male spades on the satellite carriage tilt switches with the black and white wires with female spades at one end of the provided black tilt switch cord. To complete the next step, you will need to add the belt guards to the top of each carriage. Then you can run the black motor cords and black tilt switch cords through the plastic cord holders and attach the cord holder to the corner of the belt guard. As you continue to secure the cords to the tie bars, be sure to leave enough slack for the carriages to be able to travel the entire length of the cross tube. Now you're ready to prepare the down augers for installation. Start by spraying the end of the auger with cleaning fluid and wiping it clean. Use emery cloth or steel wool to smooth the surface for easy installation of the locking collars and bearings. Slide on a flange bearing with the hub up, then a locking collar, followed by another flange bearing and a second locking collar. Slip the pulley onto the end of the down auger and align the holes. Use a roll pin punch and drive it through the holes to line them up. Turn the pulley 1/2 turn and drive a roll pin into the hole to secure the pulley onto the auger. Slide the top locking collar and bearing up until it just touches the pulley. Position a punch in the unused hole on the locking collar and lightly tap with a hammer in the direction of the shaft rotation to lock the collar in place. Do not over-tighten this collar. Use an Allen wrench to tighten the set screw on the collar. You may need to shorten the length of your down augers so they don't hit any unload augers you may want to use. If you cut off the end of a down auger, always try to cut just below a weld point on the flighting. If you need to cut at a spot where there is no weld, you will want to make a new weld before you cut. The flighting is wound on the shaft under tension, and if you cut above a weld point, the flighting will snap and lose its constant pitch. Attach the grain flinger just above the flighting and your down auger is ready to install. Lower the assembled down auger into the slot on the carriage and slide the top bearing down onto the two pre-installed 7/16 by 1.5 inch bolts. You may need to raise the end of the auger up some to get the bearings at the right angle for installation. Move the lower bearing into position and insert two 7/16 inch by 1.25 inch bolts through the bearing and through the holes in the carriage. Add 7/16 inch lock washers and nuts to all 4 bolts and tighten the bolts. Slip the belt into the motor pulley and then feed it up to the edge of the larger auger pulley. Walk the belt into position by slowly turning the larger pulley. Now add the belt guard. Repeat the process on the other carriages. In this video, we only installed 2 of the down augers before raising the cross tube for demonstration purposes. The cross tube is suspended from above on 2 crank winches. We tied a rope to the outside end of the cross tube so we could pull the tube away from the ladder as it was raised into position. Once it cleared the stirring track, we released the rope and let the unit swing back out to the bin wall where it was lowered into place. Then we moved back to the peak ring and reattached the chains to secure the stirring machine to the bin roof. Once again, count the number of chain links on each side to make sure the channel hanger is level as well as the cross tube.